Well, I thought I had concluded with this series, but then I came across an article I had written in Temple Doors issue 1 and 2, double issue, 1994. And it fits so perfectly with this series that I wanted to include it. So here we go. I'm going to read it to you with my current commentary. The Medallion of Xi. Actually, it's I-I-X, but I believe it's pronounced Xi. When the Nephilim, and in this instance, we can translate that as Anunnaki, held sway over the Tamil land, the Middle East, they experimented not only with the genetics of their own making, but with the astral confluence of the earth as well. Now, this is news to me. That is news to me since I wrote this in 1994 about the astral confluence of the earth. This really adds to the picture. They desire to create astral beings composed of mental energy infused into elemental congregation. During their period of experimentation, they produced creatures of various types in their search to form the perfect guardian beings. Indeed, these creatures guarded dimensional realms the Nephilim/Anunnaki had established, as well as kept their human genetic creations in fear and subjugation. I just wanted you to take a look at this again. I had shown it in one of the other videos, and I had mentioned that this was the guardian type of beings. Now, I was receiving that at the time. I didn't realize that I'd written about it so long ago. I'd forgotten that completely. So it's kind of a verification to me, you might say, of its accuracy, although there's really no way to prove any of this. Certainly not. But anyway, for me, it's like, oh, I said that before, So here they are. I mean, some of them. This is kind of, I would assume, an abstract way of trying to present some of these creatures, because when these statues were made, it was probably after the time when these creatures were actually involved with the Assyrians. But I'm not certain of that. That's my kind of feeling about it, though. So to continue, when I can find my place here, when the shepherds, those we also call Solarians or children of the sun, began to intermingle with the Nephilim born, they too fell under the watch of the Nephilim created guardians. Understand that only certain areas of the planet, most intensively Tamil land, were controlled by the Nephilim. The rest abided under the peaceful protection of the Solarians. Again, we can say, well, you wonder why the Solarians allowed this. That's a large topic, and I believe I addressed some of it on the other videos in regard to our human karma that was attracting these energies and actually collaborating with them in some ways. We weren't entirely, at least the Solarians weren't entirely victims of this whole gizmatch. I mean, they weren't just picked up and taken away and experimented on. That they couldn't achieve that. If they tried that, there would have been interference. So they were seduced in various ways. Look at our human beings today. We're seduced in all kinds of ways. Some of us very innocently, like sort of almost in a somnambulistic state, like when we texting on our iPhones or whatever. But there are ways to do that, and they brought some Solarians into the gameplay because they needed those genetics. And so, to continue, and one other thing, the Solarians finally did leave, at least the Sun Lords, they took off because they felt that we needed to deal with some things on our own. And then they came back later for the reparation that I talk about, for the series of reparations that I talk about on some of the previous videos. Okay, now to continue. After the last cataclysms that seized Atlantis had retreated into the earth, many Rutan Atlanteans, not only on that holy isle of Ruta, when it ascended into the time tear, migrated into the Tamil land, in a region not yet touched by the shadow of the Nephilim. It was here they established the holy city of Kyi'Ra, and that is referred back to issue 3-4 of 92. So that had already been spoken about in another issue, and it's referring to it here. Years later, Kyi'Ra was abandoned by its own people, who had mixed with the nomads, children of the Nephilim, and therefore lost their original site. In the final days of this period, before the high temple of Kyi'Ra had been buried as a result of fear and superstition, the archmage and master alchemist of the temple, Nublo, and another alchemist, Samu, designed and created a medallion to contain the energetics or program of the main computer, the cornerstone. So what we have here, and realize I wrote this in 1994, but what we really have here is we have like we have the main computer, and then we have the cell phone that's synchronized with the main computer. You can say that, or the tablet, or whatever. But it's it's a mini version that's synchronized to operate with the main hard drive, which is called the cornerstone in this referencing. Through the cornerstone, the Kaab, that's Kaab, was accessed, which is the true interdimensional field of the Kaaba. Okay, let me read that again. It didn't really come out that well. Through the cornerstone, the Kaab was accessed, which is the true interdimensional field of the Kaaba. And we understand the Kaaba is that Mecca stone, Both are the light mathematical formula of fallen light, that which collapsed, like a black hole, with the separation of powers in heaven, i.e. the fall of Lucifer. Know that the closure and burial of the temple and themselves within it would soon take place. They conspired to craft a disk containing a circuitry of access to the Kaab. In the center of the disk, in the pattern of an inverted triangle, were inserted golden lithium diamonds mined from the inner earth of the planet, where the first fires of Earth's creation bore down upon the elements to fashion these precious gems. Into these first creation firestones, the main font, or genetic inscription matrix, was transferred from the cornerstone. Without the medallion, no one could fully load the cornerstone. Thus, it could not become operative without the re-entry of the main font. Now, I find this fascinating because, like I said, I wrote this in 1994. I didn't own a computer then. There weren't very many, if any. Well, there probably were a few home computers, very, very, primitive. In fact, I believe in 1990, what was it? I'm not exactly sure, but I actually bought a home computer, and it was so difficult for me to figure out. I sent it back. I just said, I'm taking this back. I can't do this. And it really was difficult. By today's standards, it was terribly difficult to operate. You would think it would be simpler because it would be more primitive, but it was just the other way around. So really what I was using was a little star writer. Sounds marvelous, but it was a computer. Well, it was really a typewriter that had a little disc, so it was sort of a computer, but not really. So this kind of languaging here was really foreign to me, and even as I wrote it, I remember at the time, I really didn't get it too much, and now I'm reading and I'm going, oh, I understand this. It's a computer, yes, and we've got this part, and this represents this, and this represents that, But at the time I wrote it, I really didn't understand it from that perspective. The genetic inscription matrix is the quickening pattern which awakens human consciousness to access the full Metatron light spiral. It is, in essence, the Grail consciousness, as it is distributed and activated primarily within the bloodstream. The Nephilim, not their genetic engineer nomad children, but the true quote-unquote fallen ones, and we're talking about really the Anunnaki here, had orchestrated the fear that caused the burial of the Kyi'Ra temple and abandonment of the holy Solarian Rutan city of Kyi'Ra. This had been their master plan. The temple, and thus the cornerstone, was not to be destroyed, but contained, sealed off, and non-active. Like a spider sealing a fly in a silken cocoon, the Nephilim intended to access the cornerstone at a future date when they would be able to utilize it. However, when the Archmage, excuse me, page turning here, and this is a very old copy, so it's all yellowed and stiff, sort of like I am. Okay, here we go. Oh gosh. However, when the Archmage of Kyi'Ra transferred the access mode of the Metatron, the Nephilim lost their chance to penetrate the divine matrix. But was this most sacred medallion buried with the two masters along with the cornerstone in the temple? It was not, for a winged creature had been summoned through the high magic of the Archmage to carry the medallion into another dimension. The creature was known as a Charbolys, Charbollys. It was one of the milder forms that had been concocted by the Nephilim, and the shepherd priests were not above the Nephilim, and shepherd priests were not above summoning them for their own bidding. It was discovered that the Charbolys were somewhat light engendered. Understand that these myriad creatures originally created by the Nephilim were very sensitive to any elemental interaction. When they began entering the elemental sphere, they absorbed some of the energetics of wherever they touched upon that system. It wasn't long until the Nephilim realized that they had little true control of their creatures, but this is a separate story and quite complex. We return to the transport of the Zai medallion from the temple of Kyi'Ra. Well, I would really like to go into that and find out about this whole complex story at some point here. I'm going to make a note of that, see if I can access it and find out a little more about it. And, reading all of this, I'm going, this sounds like, Star Wars or something. But, where do we get our fantasy? Where do we really get it? Everything is connected. And there's all kinds of astral levels, hoary stuff. And there's also beautiful levels of cosmic light. And there's histories that are connected to all of that. So when you think of that, you realize that if this is true, what I'm reading to you here, we have created our fantasies out of it, at least some of them. Once the Archmage and his fellow alchemists completed their work with the Zai, they retreated to a labyrinth beneath the temple. Here awaiting them were two sarcophagi. They lay within these changing boxes and metamorphed into a deep state of suspension. Here we go with the suspended bodies again. As those of you who follow my work know, there's a lot of them all over the place, according to what I received. They lay within these changing boxes and metamorphed into a deep state of suspension. It is their intention to awaken in the future, when the medallion will be returned to them and they can reactivate the cornerstone. Now that's very interesting. I'm thinking, I'm feeling, I'm cognizing that this is going to happen when the Pyramidus radius matrix is in full bloom. It was essential that their genetic bodies be maintained as they had integrated their blood chromosomes into the disc circuitry. Note, reincarnated paragenetics also carry the blood charge, but not in the complete pattern needed to accomplish this specific goal. Again, it's possible that this activation that they're talking about here might be crucial to the full register, creating the full register of the Pyramidus radius, which is our platform for working with the ultra beings, our kindred, to prepare us for the actual quantum leap into the new Earth star. To continue reading, the Zai was taken by the Charbolys, as commanded, to another time. It was presented to the Archmage in a future incarnation. He since has sent it through the Rana time stream to various locations, keeping it from the Nephilim, who are quite adept at time travel. It is not a simple cat and mouse procedure. There are many facets that cannot be explained without your full knowledge of complex sciences of which you have no current understanding. But it is also that the Xi, which is nothing more than a highly defined computer disk, has been kept out of the Nephilim grasp through time. To put it into a perspective that is more real to your state of reality, it is analogous to a large corporation who has a secret knowledge that it does not wish a competing firm to garner. The powers of the corporation realize that their main computer is possibly, no, that's not right, of being accessed. It has the possibility of being accessed by high-tech computer pirates, hackers in other words. Thus, they store the main logic on a disk and remove that disk from the computer, sequestering it in a vault in another country until they are able to control the situation. Well, I would update that because in those days there were only computer disks. There wasn't anything else, in my time. And so that's why I would be given this statement then about a disk. But if you think about it now, it could be one of those little things that plugs into the computers. I can't even think of the name of it now. Oh gosh, showing my age. Anyway, those little things, and you plug them in, and you can take information off, and then you can plug it into another computer, and you can put the information on. So it could be more like that. But actually, I think that the Xi disk is more like a cell phone, without the call home frequency maybe, but the ability to, extract lots of information and not only keep it on that object, which is a tablet, a phone, or disk, or whatever, but to actually work it in a way. I think the Xi medallion is more of a functional system computer, rather than just holding information like a disk would do, or one of those other things I can't think of the name of it would do. So, but it still has to have, for complete full spectrum activity, it has to be able to access the main computer, which is this cob thing, this cornerstone. And if the main computer is shut down right now, it wouldn't be able to access it until it was awakened. The possibility is, and I'm receiving this actually, so this tapping me on the shoulder, the Xi medallion has the capability of reactivating the computer under certain circumstances. Okay, so we continue. From your current perspective, the Xi is now in the 11th century France, and that would be from my 1994 perspective, within a monastery. The monks of this conclave are all time travelers. The Archmage, who is never far from the medallion, is often to be found there as well, not incarnated, but as a dimensional voyager. This is one of those time markers Thoth is always talking about. Of course, the Nephilim know where the medallion is located, but it is not a simple matter of journeying through time to steal it. When a being of one time frame journeys physically into another, certain laws are displaced and others manifest. These mutables are complex and need to be considered when transporting anything through time, especially when it does not belong to you, or rather does not conform to the doctrine of signature of your chromosomes, the key to physical time travel. Wow, I don't pretend to even understand that now. We'll just pretend I do, and let's move on. The Xi medallion can also allow access to the Torhana vault within the Tor Hill at Glastonbury, where the Archangel Stone is kept. This is the crystal from the staff of Moses, which is calibrated to the Grail dynamic, and on the inner planes must be integrated with the Antichrist before it can assume his earth. He can assume his earth-incarnated empowerment. It is under the authority of the defending Archangel Michael to keep this integration from occurring. The angelic kingdom cannot act on earth without the spirit consciousness of the planet. Thus is revealed a dependent and ever-unfolding chain of support with checks and balances supplied among the forces of good and evil. Deep breath. And so I ask in that time, in 1994, I say, what happened with the Kali time rift from the time of the solar eclipse on May 10th, 1994 to the night of May 15th, 1994? Now, I don't know why I was asking that. Obviously, there's a reason, but I've long forgotten it by now. Both states. A major adjustment in the rift occurred between May 9th through May 18th, with peak activity on the 10th and the 15th. This came about as a result of several coincident factors carefully designed by the hierarchy. Okay, it's going to go on about that, which really isn't of our interest right now, so I'm going to skip that. I'm going to skip that. Let's see what else I want to read to you here. Hold on. Okay, so I'm saying here, on the night of May 15th, I mentally projected back through time to the monastery in France where the Xi medallion is in keeping. I then underwent a dynamic process with the medallion in which knowledge was transferred energetically from it through my body via the areopax. You remember the areopax, that's the main energy pattern for all portals and interdimensional work in a lot of things, even in the human body. So I said, I went through my body via the areopax I was wearing and into a large clear topaz containing the Templemar holograph. Now, the Templemar, of course, is the most major grid on the planet if you don't include the all-encompassing Pyramidus radius that is forming. It was not even, as far as I know, had not begun to form in 1994. I was acting, it would seem, as a biological medium for inscribing data into the Templemar crystal, and thus the temple itself, directly from the Xi medallion. Am I correct in this conclusion? So states, you are. The data being transferred is the main program for the Grail template within the Imlamar temple. It was only when the Kali rift was moving and shifting that it was possible for this transference to occur without interception from the Nephilim. We wish to say here that the term Nephilim contains quite a broad definition, as there are myriad gradients of fallen ones. Another term would be Luciferics, among other references. The Nephilim who interfered with the races of Earth through the genetic engineering and tampering with the astral plane of the Earth, these are the Kahum. Well, of course, they're also, we know them as the Anunnaki, but we're going to call them what Thoth calls them here, the Kahum. Nephilim. We have given you information before on the free Nephilim, that's P-H-R-E-E, those who have returned to the Metatron yet are not able to ascend until they redeem a remaining part of their whole light dynamic. You might say in fundamentalist terms that they are 99% saved. Those Nephilim who are pursuing the Xi medallion are the Thasi. They are analogous to special forces operation in a military structure. Okay, let's see what else here. Okay, this is really interesting here. Could you address the Orion question? You have touched upon this before, but I wish for more information. This concerns the apparent double Orion reality, where there are both the good guys and the bad guys, both from or claiming to be from Orion. So Thoth states, Orion is also a broad term. Firstly, Orion is a whole constellation in which many beings abide. But the term Orion that is generally used refers to a specific reality continuum emanating from that constellation. When he says generally used, he means by him. The lower or lesser light engendered portion of that continuum is under Nephilim control. Again, remember what we use when we use the term Nephilim in defining all those who took the plunge with Lucifer, including the more spiritually advanced free Nephilim. Those Nephilim who work with the Kabis, or lower part of the Orion spectrum, are among those who work against the Metatronic order, or the realm beyond the point of half-light consciousness, the Orotronic spiral. And here is found the true seed of Orion. Now, that didn't sound too good, but what I'm talking about here, he's talking about here, is the Metatron, which was forced to ascend and divide from the violated half during the Luciferic exchange. The main challenge in determining this complex picture is in the perspective given. channeled, regressed, or even consciously remembered information concerning the past, present, and future must be strained through the perspective of various sentient sources. None of those sources is omnipotent. No matter how spiritually advanced, they come from a specific vantage point in the scheme of things. And of course, that includes me. And my vantage point is from the Orion of Thoth, from the full light engendered Orion. Now, see, he's mentioned before that every single solar system, every single constellation, every single system, every single thing in the universal all that we are creating in our holographic field or perceiving in our holographic field is dualistic, because we are operating in a dualistic system. And dualism is not all bad. It's not bad at all. In fact, it's just that we do a very bad job of operating in it. So, and so have these beings that are on our wavelength that are falling all over the place and creating these half-light spectrums. So you could say the Arcturian system has the same thing, the higher version, the lower version. Everything, that we can perceive does. So where do we want to place our focus? That's the big question. And I think it's a pretty no-brainer answer, at least for those of you who are listening to this. Now I ask, no, let me see. That's the end of that. Let me see. Hold on just a second. Well, it kind of goes on to another part, but this is very interesting. So it is germane to what we're discussing here, so I'm going to throw it in. I ask, is this planet now entering a phase into which we can expect numerous shifts in the time rift, that what you call the Kali rift? Again, remember, this is 1994, but that's just a blink away from 2018 as far as such things are concerned. Thoth says, this is so. Some of these shifts or movements of time waves will be stimulated under controlled situations. Others will be natural shifts modified by controlled stimulus. The created shifts are to allow pressure releases so that the natural movements will not be too unstable for this planet's time continuum. The mapping of the time flow, the Rana, and its rift is similar to viewing a map of strata with accompanying fault lines. The Kali rift is a fault line, or rather one large fault line with many smaller ones branching out of it within the flow of time. And I ask, how are the implosions of the comets on Jupiter in July going to affect the Kali rift in Earth? Of course, this is way back when, but he says it will increase the time wave. Time will move faster and then suddenly slow down again, but not to the current pace. When we say that time speeds up or slows down, we mean that the awareness factor, the energetic of this factor nesting or unfolding into consciousness is either escalated or decreased. The planet will experience an increase in geological changes, magnetic shifts due to surges at the core of the Earth in the central sun atoma. Well, wow, we could see all kinds of things that have happened since the Jupiter event that would be causing these fluctuations as well. Okay. Oh, this is good. She's talking about something that I was trying to locate here, and here it is. So here we go. You have referred previously to what Mrs. Nixon calls the Viv Axis. This is from a book. Let me see. And given various other magnetic points in soul human development. On this earth plane, which magnetic point is the most dynamic to this individual? To the individual, sorry. But let me go back and read about the Viv Axis. The word Viv Axis is the name we have been given. We have given the geographical point where a permanent magnetic alignment was introduced. Now, wait, I've got to start over. This is quoting, okay, from the book, Born to be Magnetic by Frances Dixon. Let me make that clear. This is her book. The word Viv Axis is the name we have given the geographical point where a permanent magnetic alignment was introduced into the atomic structure of our bones. Introduced at the approximate time of our birth, our bones solidified. A magnetic alignment which is characteristic of the Earth's magnetism of that particular geographic point. Thus, each person has its own individual Viv Axis. In accordance with the law of wave magnetics, when a wave returns to the source of energy from which it originated, we find we can at all times detect a two-way link to our own Viv Axis, the point of our magnetic energy. Now, that's what Francis Nixon says about it. Now, I have to pause a moment and say that just recently, I don't know, a few months ago, actually, that was when I made the video, but I wrote about it 2 years ago, maybe. Thoth was talking about the flashpoint, and I had forgotten this Viv Axis stuff. But after I read it, after I wrote it, and then I read it, William Bueller reminded me about the Viv Axis, and I went, oh my gosh, it's the same thing. And when I read it again, yeah, he's talking about the same thing, but he's calling it flashpoint. Now in 2017, he's calling it a flashpoint. Or 2015, maybe it was when I wrote it. Anyway, so let's hold on to hold on a moment. I'm trying to stop this. Well, I apologize for that, and I'm not going to cut it out because it would take me hours to work it all and then load it up because of the rendering time of this little Zoom thing is much less than if I take it into a program and edit it. Then the Zoom time would be hours. So I'm not going to do that. So I apologize for the phone ring, but let's just pretend that didn't happen, and we shall continue. Okay, so as I recall, I was getting all excited about this Viv Axis thing and how it related to the flashpoint that Thoth has told me, just about 2 years ago, and I'd forgotten about the Viv Axis, and it's obviously the same thing. My question to Thoth, again, in 1994 was, you have referred previously to what Mrs. Nixon calls the Viv Axis and given various other magnetic points in soul human development. On this Earth plane, which magnetic point is the most dynamic to the individual? Thoth says, the Viv Axis. All these magnetic points are incorporated in the Areopax geometric, allowing the individual working with this energy of the Areopax to align with her magnetic center, not only on Earth, but in time. Now, I want to relate to you something that happened to me, and I think I might have on another video somewhere, sometime, but I'm going to relate it again because it really ties directly into this. And that is that when I moved back to Crestone last year, it was in February 22nd, ta-ta, and March 10th was my birthday. So it was either on the day of my birthday, well, it was actually a few days after my birthday, that someone was driving me around in this area, and we were sort of up high, and I was looking down in the valley, and just this energy just filled me, and I realized, it said to me, the energy said to me, not a voice or anything, but the energy itself spoke to my being and told me that this was the place of my birth, right here in Crestone, in this area. And I thought, well, no, that's not true. I was born in South America, in Caripito, Venezuela, where my father worked for an oil company at the time. And it was, no, you're born here. And I said, no, I'm not born here. I know where I was born. I'm not that old yet that I can't remember. And so I went around in my brain with this a little bit, and then Thoth came in and sort of settled it all down for me and explained that my Viv Axis, well, he didn't use the word, but I knew that's what he meant, had switched from Venezuela to Crestone. And I said, how is that possible? And he said, well, all things are possible. And that many people's Viv Axises were going to start switching now from the place they were born, especially those of us who are older, who were born way back when. And now energies are shifting and things are changing. Magnetic energies are changing. And now when I read what Francis Nixon says here about our bones, as our bones solidified at the time of our birth, we kept that magnetic atomic structure in place in our bones, and so that remained our Viv Axis point. Well, what if that magnetic shift changes? What if, even though our bones are solid, and mine are pretty solid right now, they would simply, somehow, the magnetic energy would still be able to shift in them, maybe through a time experience, time shiftings or whatever, and a new Viv Axis point could form, turning loose of the old one. So that is basically what Thoth says has happened for me. And it's not like I'm the only one on the planet. Certainly not. People are changing now. Maybe perhaps the older generation first, because their Viv Axis points were set in a time frame that's already just, the timeline is shifting. If the timeline shifts significantly, the Viv Axis point is going to have to. That's my take on it. And not entirely my take. I'm basing it a lot on the Thothic perspective here. But I'm seeing that for all of us, young or old, we might be having to be prepared to have our Viv Axis shift. Maybe not everybody. Everybody has a different role in what we're doing on the planet and what's going on. But I believe that, like some people are having birthing children into other dimensions. They're having pregnancies that don't even show. And I'm not talking about ET stuff, but, and they're birthing children into these other realms. And that's not everybody's doing that, but some people are. And the ones that seem to be doing this are way beyond childbearing age in the physical. So that's one thing. So this other thing about Viv Axis point shifts, another grouping of souls incarnated now are going through that process. And they're doing it for the good of the whole planet, not just for their own purposes. Because as these shifts take place, the planet responds to that. So anyway, let me see if there's anything else I want to share with you here from the past before I stop this recording. Okay, I'm going to continue for a while because there are some other really, I think, interesting things here that I'm going to keep on with that are related. So I say, Greg Braden states that the Great Pyramid's blocks are actually cement made from a unique mix of fossilized matter. You had given me information some years ago that the blocks were once in a liquid state, later hardened into place. Braden further believes that because the cement contains fossil bones, that the pyramid vibrates to the frequency of our bones as well. Since the Viv Axis resonates from the bones, is then the Great Pyramid of Giza an amplified Viv Axis point of the entire Earth in relation to humanity? And Thoth replies, this is correct. If a person he's talking about wearing the Areopax medallion, but we also know now we can incorporate it in a deeper way without having to have the medallion itself. Possibly it was more difficult in 1994 than it is now. But anyway, a person interacting with, shall we say, the Areopax, which we also call the Isis Eye, were to stand at the Viv Axis point of the Great Pyramid, its own V point, which is aligned to the Earth's V point. She would create a new Viv Axis point for himself, and while not erasing the old, would dominate in his bioenergetic field. Now that's interesting. Before I continue, I'm going to ask Thoth, does that mean that my old Viv Axis point is still present in my field in some respect? And I'm receiving that it is. It's not the dominant one. It's not the one that's controlling the frequency of my being. It's kind of tucked away. But it's there. And it has some use to my whole dimensional self still in my incarnated form. Because I was kind of assuming that it was being replaced. That means other people's would be that were involved in this. But no. In most instances, I feel now, from what I'm receiving from Thoth now, that it would be there, it is there, but it's kind of like in the background. And now he's saying, if we go back to 1994, what he's saying here, he's saying that anybody could do this if they created if they went into the Great Pyramid and stood at the exact point and blah, 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 this would happen. Obviously, there are a lot of factors involved that he's not mentioning here. It would have to come together very precisely. But now, in 2018, this can be happening spontaneously. We don't have to go to the Great Pyramid to do it if it is part of our soul plan to have this second point activated and become more dominant. Okay, let's continue with what he's saying here. This new point would be the same V point as the Great Pyramids, and thus the Earth. If you're in the Great Pyramid and create this, only certain individuals would be able to handle such a transfer. But if enough souls could maintain it, it would greatly benefit the planet as a whole by locating the Earth's magnetic pattern through the human element. By bilocating, we mean establishing a separate, higher frequency match between the Earth and humanity. This was originally in place in the first millennium. That's the first timeline frequency of before we separated from the Rana time wave, but has since been disrupted. It is likened to AM and FM radio frequencies. Humanity used to have both frequencies and now only has AM. Whew, this is pretty powerful. I'd completely forgotten about this. Okay, so I ask, how many people standing at the Viv Axis point in the Great Pyramid while wearing the Isis eye would it take to create this bilocation for the planet? Would they all have to be there at one time? Both. Technically, it would take 144,000 incarnated souls if each soul was carrying the same spirit to matter charge of an average human rate. But the STM, spirit to matter, charges vary among people, and it also changes for individuals as they move through their life experience. Thus, this is a difficult question to answer. Even one human wearing the Isis eye, embodying the Isis eye, who is in the right spirit to matter, STM, could create certain changes in the Earth frequency. They would not have to be there all together in order to accomplish this. So let's just look at this for a minute. I mean, my little brain is comprehending this as a potential project that maybe some of you listening to this might be interested in working with. Now, remember, I sort of got going on this whole Isis eye, this Areopax thing, where people could be going to different locations and installing Areopax energy frequencies. And it kind of didn't take off. A few people did it and reported back to me. But you know, that kind of project needs organization. It needs consistency. It needs people directively working with it. I'm only one person, and I have my health considerations, and I'm just trying to do what I'm doing here. As you can see, I'm pretty busy at it. So I can't do something like that. But this really ties in to the whole Areopax project that I was trying to get off the ground. So this would be, you know, like a major aspect. So if anyone out there is interested in actually spearheading a project like this, and simply, you know, I'd be the I could be the counseling frequency or through me, but they would be the ones spearheading the program. I mean, this would be really a powerful thing to do, provided this is accurate information, and I always tend to believe it. But I can't promise you that it is. But anyway, if someone were resonant with it, let's say, and wanted to spearhead a program like this, contact me, because we could work something out here. I think this would be very powerful for the planet, but it would be something that would be a project, and that person would have to, you know, stay on top of it and organize it and get it going and keep it going. So that's an idea, you know. So the next thing that I ask is the golden star of Mazuriel identified as the true origin of the Solarian shepherds, one of the planets of divine fire? This is kind of going off into something else, but let's take it for a while and see what happens. It is the sun of those planets. Please tell us more about them. Okay, Thoth says, there are 12 planets of the Mazuriel solar system. This system is in the dimension of the first millennium from the perspective of your current Earth time. The planets of divine fire exist within their sun. As we have long told you, the greater universe contains in it its worlds within its solar consciousness, as once did the Earth solar system in its first millennium. As the Mazuriel star containing its planets of worlds begins to interface with the second millennium of your solar system's consciousness, these greater beings will begin to make contact with minds of your world. Well, that is sort of an unrelated topic. I just sort of threw it in there. I think we've come to the end here of what I wanted to share with you. And so I hope that, it has some value to you. And like I said, if anybody wants to contact me about this Viv Axis Areopax potential project, I'm all ears. Thank you all for listening once again.